Hi guys, I'm making this video in response to a couple of questions that were asked by a user called Fallen Angel. This will probably only be of interest if you're transitioning or thinking about transitioning in Scotland or the UK. The first question was, what problems have I had with the NHS? This is something we love to bitch about as Brits. We're fucking glad that we've got the NHS, but because it's no perfect, we'll find every fault that we can with it. The biggest pain for me is the length of the waiting list for gender clinics. There's not a lot of funding going to our doctors operating the clinics, so there isn't a lot of time to be spent on the thousands of people that need seen at these gender clinics. So the waiting lists are fucking massive. I had to wait 10 months. The waiting list now for Glasgow is 12 months. Down in England, in Charing Cross, I know they're not accepting anyone until next year, at the end of 2015. So it's something that if you're thinking about it, even if you haven't made up your mind, if you're even considering it, get your name down, because it could be that in a year's time you'll be really glad that you did. And if you change your mind, it doesn't matter. Just don't go to the appointment. You can cancel it. That's fine, no problem. So if you're in doubt, get your name down right now. The next issue that I've found with the NHS, they will not treat you if you go private. If you get private treatment to skip the waiting list, that's fine, but everything that you do from that point on comes out your own pocket if it's got anything to do with your testosterone or your transition. GPs will treat you for like your sore throat or your cough or whatever, but they won't touch you for anything to do with blood tests or testosterone or hormones or injections or anything to do with your transition. I think it's to do with funding, basically. They don't get paid to do that, and in England they've got shared care, which is GPs and private practitioners communicating basically, and they're able to work together. But in Scotland we don't have that. There's no funding for it, so GPs just won't do it. I phoned up a bunch of GPs trying to find a new one to switch to that might be able to help, but there aren't any. So that's something to be aware of if you go private. Next question was, how long does it take to start testosterone? From start to finish, it's 3 months minimum, 3 months absolute bare minimum, but if there's any other issues it can extend longer than that. But if everything is well and you're confident and sure it's what you want and you're healthy, it'll be 3 months. So the requirements for that, first you get an initial assessment. This is what the waiting list is for. This is what you put your name down for, and you wait 12 months and you go to this appointment. This is your initial assessment, and what happens, you talk to a gender specialist. It's a doctor that has treated other trans patients and there's nothing that you say is going to surprise them, basically. They've heard it all before. It's going to be an hour-long conversation where you explain to them why you feel the way that you do and how you feel, and it's just to let them get to know you so they can recommend treatment. It's something that a lot of folk worry about. It's something that's quite stressful when you're leading up to it, because you think it's an assessment, it's a big test. They're going to measure your worth compared to some mark and see how trans you are and all that, but that's not what happens. They're going to ask you common sense questions like, what clues were there when you were growing up, and how do your parents and family and your friends take it, and that sort of stuff. It's anything that you can think they're going to ask you, that's what they're going to ask you. You don't have to try hard to be prepared for it. The second requirement, because there's a wee list that I've got written down here, your second requirement is you need to get a second opinion done. This is a second gender specialist doctor who will talk to you, and it's going to basically be a carbon copy of the first appointment. All the same questions, just asked by a different person. They're not going to talk to each other until they've both seen you, and they'll make an assessment of how much you would benefit from starting to transition, basically. So if both of their opinions agree, then you'll get the green light to go ahead, basically. The next requirement, you need to get a blood test done. So the second opinion was your psychological and mental capacity, but your blood test is your physical capacity to transition. This is where they test like your liver function, your blood count, your hormone level. They test everything, basically. Anything that testosterone can affect, they'll test. And it's, again, nothing to be scared of, because unless you've got some terrible disease or you're a raging alcoholic and your liver's failing, you're gonna pass, you'll be fine. But it's something they've got to do just in case anyway. So that's that's what happens within your 3-month period between your first and last appointment. The final sort of hurdle between you and testosterone, you need to go back to the first doctor that you saw and you go for a second, it's like a follow-up appointment basically. This is what happens at your 3rd month. You go back to them, you tell them how you've been getting on, how you've been progressing with your social transition and all that, like changing your name and whether you've come out to your friends and family and co-workers and all that. For some doctors that will be a requirement, for others it won't, it just depends who you see. But at that appointment, if your blood test's been fine and your second opinion's been fine, at that point they'll give you the okay to start testosterone. Either that, or if everything hasn't been okay and you've had second thoughts, or maybe they think that you're not prepared enough, or you're not mentally prepared, or you're not outgoing and confident enough to be able to do it without kind of falling apart basically, then they'll tell you, we think you need to slow down, and here's the plan that we've got for you, the plan of action to get you to where you need to be. But if you're confident and you know what you're doing, that's not going to be something you need to worry about. So at that appointment, they'll be able to tell you, I can give you a prescription right now, and if you're lucky like I was, you can nip out, get the prescription filled, run back to the clinic and get it done right there on the same day. So that's your timeline, 3 months plus however much if you need more time. Another question was, do you have to see a psychologist? It's not a requirement, but a lot of gender specialists are psychologists. It's kind of part of the job, it's reading people's minds and all that. Well, psychologist, not telepath, but you are quite likely to meet psychologists and psychiatrists along the way of your journey. So if you've got some scare about them, or if you're a Scientologist or something, that maybe it's not for you, but it's not something where you're maybe thinking, I need to lie down on a couch for 10-hour sessions and talk my heart out to someone with a clipboard. No, it's nothing to do with that. You don't have to get therapy or anything like that unless you actually need it or want it. I haven't had any of that whatsoever. My second opinion was a psychiatrist, but that was just because she was a psychiatrist. It was also a gender specialist, so you'll probably see one, but don't worry about it. It's not something to be scared of. The last thing I'd like to say is you can self-refer to clinics. You don't need to wait for your GP to do it. Like, you don't have to try and make a doctor's appointment and go along and say to them, yeah, I think I'm having like gender problems, can you help me with that? Because they're not going to have a clue what to do. They'll have a phone number for you to call, or a web address for you to go to, and they'll say, yeah, go there, that will tell you how to do it. It's not going to tell you much. And again, you don't need to go off to see a psychologist to get through a bunch of sessions with them for them to tell you, yeah, here's how you refer to this just gender clinic. Do it yourself, it's easy. All you have to do is find the phone number, you Google it up, find the one that's closest to you. If you're in Scotland, that'll be the Sandyford, 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 and phone up the phone number there. You'll tell them, I want to add my name onto the waiting list for the gender clinic, and they'll say, okay, they'll do it right there, right then, and that's you. But you need to wait about 12 months at the moment as a current waiting list, so get that done as soon as you can if you're thinking or questioning, or if you're unsure about it, because you can always change your mind and take your name off later. But if you get to the point where you're desperate, 10 months from now, you're going to really wish that you'd done that sooner. If you choose to go private, there's a few clinics that you can go to, but there's only 3 that I know of. In Scotland, there's one in Edinburgh, it's called Medical Alternative, that's the one that I went to. In London there's 2 clinics, you've got Gender Care and Trans Health. So all of these are about the same price mark, it's about £230 per appointment, so it's a lot of money to be dropping. Mind, you've got to have 3 of these hour-long appointments, plus your blood test, which is about £250, and it all adds up. So it's something to bear in mind, you know, if you start getting restless, is it worth the cost? For me it was. So I hope that was helpful. I can't really think of anything else to add, but if you want to ask any questions, then send me a message or post something in the comments and I'll do my best to get around to it.